The Indians were non-aligned, and they treated the Chinese really generously. And I've got a whole list of generosity. So India immediately recognizes China in 1950. Countries like the United States didn't forever. And when the San Francisco Treaty, I think it's signed 1951 in the United States, ending the war with Japan, India refuses to sign because China and Russia aren't there to sign as well. And then to help China break out of its diplomatic isolation at the end of the Korean War, India signs a friendship treaty with China. And as part of that friendship treaty, it recognizes Chinese sovereignty over Tibet. Under international law, contrary to what Vladimir Putin is doing lately, under international law, if you recognize someone's sovereignty over territory, that is permanent. You cannot back out of it legally under international law. So the Chinese promise, I don't know, there's some like peaceful coexistence or whatever. They're promising the Indians, but that has no permanence under international law, whereas this thing does. And then from 1960 on, the Indians are voting to seat the People's Republic of China, not Taiwan, on the UN. Meanwhile, in the background, all this road building is going on. Those roads are being built between 1950 and 1957. And the Indians aren't going to figure out until 1958 that the roads are there. Meanwhile, roads completed. The Chinese want to complete their control over Tibet, and so they're going to send big armies up there. And Tibetan culture is much more, it's of Indian origin. It's not Chinese origin. So this repression of Tibetan culture just appalls the Indians. And then 2 days before the People's Liberation Army is going to make it into Lhasa, which is the capital of Tibet, the Dalai Lama flees. He's the spiritual leader of Tibet. He flees to India, where he's remained ever since, to the absolute horror and anger of China. So at about this time, the Chinese come to the Indians and say, look, why don't we do a swap on sovereignty? You recognize our sovereignty over that Aksai China plateau where nobody lives, but it's really good for the roads, for China's western route. And then we'll recognize your sovereignty over this much more densely populated Arunachal Pradesh. And Nehru doesn't want to hear anything about it. So during the Cuban Missile Crisis, when Russia is much too busy worrying about who's going to be lobbing nukes at whom, this is when China launches. And in the 1960s Sino-Indian War, and China just plain takes the Aksai China plateau. The Indians are appalled because they don't have any roads to be able to deploy up there, whereas the Chinese do. Their defeat is just total, and they can't believe the Chinese did this to them. Here's Nehru afterwards. There are not many instances in history where one country, that is India, has gone out of her way to be friendly and cooperative with the Chinese government and people and plead their cause in the councils of the world, and then for the Chinese government to return evil for good, and even to go to the extent of committing aggression and invade our sacred land. Who does this? So I get it. The Chinese get the territory they want. That was the goal of that war. But what they have done is taken a country, India, which had its leadership terribly idealistic, not interested in becoming militarized at all, and making them angry forever. India immediately doubles the size of its army within the next 10 years to up to 750,000 people, creates 10 mountain divisions useful against China, and they've never ceased being so angry. And then if you think about this, what if, instead of playing this game this way, China and India had teamed up? I would suspect we would be in a completely very different world order now if that is what they'd done instead. But this is China's decision, not India's fault on this one.